The call that shattered Daniel's world came on an ordinary Wednesday morning, a call no husband ever wants to receive. Daniel Thompson was sitting at his office desk in Atlanta, reviewing monthly sales reports when his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Glancing down, his heart skipped a beat as he read Lincoln Elementary School. Panic surged through his chest. Was something wrong with his daughter? He answered instantly, voice trembling. Hello, this is Daniel. But it wasn't his daughter's teacher. The voice on the other end was frantic. Sir, your wife Emily, she's been in an accident. She was hit by a bus right outside the school gate. It's bad. She's being rushed to St. Mary's Emergency Clinic. For a moment, everything went silent, except for the pounding of his heart. What he whispered, already grabbing his car keys. Without a word to his assistant, he bolted out of the office, running through the crowded hallway, ignoring the curious stares. As traffic blurred past, Daniel gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, praying under his breath. Please, God, let Emily be okay. When he arrived at the hospital, the sterile white walls and the smell of antiseptic pressed down on him like a heavy fog. A nurse glanced up at him with weary eyes. She was brought in less than an hour ago. The doctors are still working on her. Please, wait here. Daniel collapsed onto a hard plastic chair, hands shaking uncontrollably, memories of Emily flashing before him, her laughter, her strength, her warm hugs. Just then, their 12-year-old daughter Grace ran down the corridor, tears streaming down her cheeks, clutching her little sister Lily. Daniel opened his arms, gathering them close, his own heart breaking at their sobs. It's okay, babies, he whispered, voice trembling. Daddy's here. Mommy will be fine. Days blurred into each other as Daniel sat vigil by Emily's hospital bed. After hours of waiting, the surgeon emerged with tired eyes and a heavy voice. Mr. Thompson. Daniel leapt to his feet. Yes, how's my wife? Please tell me she's alive. The doctor sighed deeply. She is, but it's serious. Her spine suffered severe trauma, and both legs have multiple fractures. We've stabilized her, but she'll need extensive orthopedic surgeries and months of physical therapy. It's going to be a long road to recovery physically and emotionally. Daniel nodded numbly, his vision swimming. Can I see her? The doctor led him into the ward, where Emily lay pale and unconscious, wires and monitors attached to her fragile frame. Her once strong arms lay limp, her face, bruised lips dry. Daniel sat beside her, took her cold hand into his own trembling grip, and whispered, his voice cracking. I'm here, Em. You're going to be okay. We'll get through this together. Over the following weeks, Emily underwent 3 complicated surgeries. Daniel became her rock, spending each day by her side, spoon-feeding her meals, brushing her hair when she couldn't lift her arms gently, helping her drink water through a straw. He learned to lift her into a wheelchair, bathe her, and clean her wounds without flinching at the pain in her eyes. Their bedroom was moved to the living room to avoid stairs, and Daniel slept on the old leather couch nearby, waking at every sound in case she needed him. He paused his business commitments, choosing instead to care for the woman he had loved since college. But as each dawn bled into dusk, the exhaustion began to creep in like a silent thief, stealing his strength. He felt it in his bones each morning and at night, as he lay awake listening to Emily's quiet sobs. A shadow of resentment flickered deep within him. He tried to bury it with duty and love. But shadows have a way of growing when left unchecked. As weeks turned into months, Daniel's exhaustion began to suffocate him, like a heavy winter blanket he couldn't shake off. Every morning felt harder than the last, lifting Emily from bed to wheelchair, spoon-feeding her oatmeal as she sat staring silently out the window, wiping tears from her cheeks when her arms were too weak to reach. He tried to stay patient to remind himself of his vows, but each day felt like a grim routine rather than an act of love. The thought of hiring a caregiver crossed his mind more than once, but each time a bitter memory stopped him cold. 3 years earlier, after his business expanded, they had hired a young woman named Carla to help with household chores. At first, Carla was perfect, efficient, polite, and sweet with Grace and Lily. But within 4 months, the perfect mask cracked. Emily discovered Carla had been stealing grocery money and scolding Lily harshly when alone. Worse still, Daniel caught her one afternoon touching Grace's hair and shoulders in a way that unsettled him deeply. The betrayal burned Emily's trust to ashes, and from then on, they swore never to let a stranger live under their roof again. Now, as Emily sat immobile in her wheelchair, staring vacantly at the garden she once tended, Daniel found himself drowning in responsibilities, cooking, cleaning, carrying Emily to the bathroom, driving the girls to school. His sister came by to help when she could, but she had her own family to care for. Emily had no relatives nearby. Her only sister lived in Oregon and could only offer comfort over the phone. Daniel never voiced his anguish aloud, but the weight crushed him in quiet moments. He began staying longer at work, avoiding her calls, making excuses for late meetings, just to escape the suffocating atmosphere at home. Some nights when Emily cried softly in the dark, asking if he still loved her, Daniel pretended to be asleep, tears burning behind closed eyes as guilt gnawed at what remained of his weary heart. One late autumn afternoon, as golden leaves drifted silently across their porch, Daniel pulled into the driveway. After another long day at work, his chest tight with guilt and exhaustion. Through the living room window, he saw someone kneeling by Emily's wheelchair, holding her hands tenderly. It was Sarah Miller, Emily's best friend since college. Sarah had been away on a business project in Denver when the accident happened, but as soon as she heard, she returned home immediately. That evening, she sat with Emily for hours, wiping her tears, braiding her hair, and feeding her homemade soup with the care of a sister. "Oh, Emily," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I still can't believe this happened to you." Emily managed a faint smile, her eyes tired but warm. "I'm alive, Sarah. That's all that matters." Standing at the doorway, Daniel watched them in silence, shadows from the setting sun casting long lines across the floor. Sarah had always been around since their university days, spending weekends with them helping with Emily's craft shop and babysitting Grace and Lily when needed. At first, her return brought relief. She visited daily after work, bringing hot meals and fresh fruit, staying late into the evening to clean Emily's room, or bathe her with gentle, unhurried hands. Daniel felt grateful for the reprieve. Sarah's presence gave him moments to breathe again, to step outside and stand alone under the cold autumn sky with tears he couldn't let Emily see. But as days passed, Daniel began to notice small, unsettling things, the way Sarah's eyes lingered on him, when Emily wasn't looking, how her fingers brushed his hand too long when passing a glass of water, and the way she smiled at him softly, almost invitingly. One Saturday evening, he walked into the kitchen to find Sarah humming while washing dishes. The girls were upstairs doing homework, and Emily was napping in the living room. "You really don't have to do all this," he said quietly. Sarah turned her smile warm and intimate. "I want to," she replied, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "I can't stand by and watch my best friend suffer while her husband is drowning." Daniel swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he whispered, "I don't even know who I am anymore." And in the silence that followed, something unspoken passed between them, something neither of them dared to name yet. That night, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Daniel lay awake on the living room couch, staring at the dark ceiling, while Emily slept quietly in her hospital bed by the window. His mind replayed every touch, every lingering glance from Sarah, the softness in her voice that seemed to wrap around him like a warm blanket on a freezing night. In those moments, guilt fought with desire, but exhaustion numbed his moral clarity. Over the following weeks, Sarah's visits became more frequent and extended late into the evenings. She would bring fresh-baked bread, creamy soups, and little gifts for Grace and Lily hair ribbons, scented erasers, storybooks. When Emily napped after therapy, Sarah would stay in the kitchen wiping down counters with silent dedication. Sometimes Daniel joined her, their shoulders brushing the charged silence broken only by the ticking wall clock and the hum of the refrigerator. One quiet evening, after putting the girls to bed, Daniel stepped out onto the back porch to clear his head. The sky was bruised with purples and grays, the air cool against his flushed face. There he found Sarah already sitting on the old porch swing, arms folded, her gaze fixed on the darkened yard. She looked up as he approached. "Rough day?" she asked softly. He sat beside her, rubbing his tired eyes. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. "I'm not a husband, not a father, just a caretaker. And I'm so tired, Sarah, so tired." Without a word, she reached out and placed her hand gently over his, her warmth seeping into his cold fingers. "You're human, Daniel," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. "You're allowed to feel tired." He didn't pull away. In that moment, under the dim porch light and the quiet rustle of leaves in the night breeze, something shifted irrevocably. That night, Daniel slept in the guest room instead of by Emily's side. Neither of them spoke about it the next morning, but the silent betrayal settled between them like a thick fog, unseen yet suffocating, signaling that their world was about to unravel in ways they could never have imagined. As winter crept in, bringing gray skies and bone-deep cold, the boundaries between Daniel and Sarah blurred until they seemed almost non-existent. What began with comforting words on the porch swing soon shifted into longer conversations, whispered late at night text messages sent after Emily fell asleep, and fleeting touches that lingered like secrets burning their skin. One quiet afternoon, while Emily napped in her wheelchair by the living room window, Sarah stood washing dishes at the sink, her hair pulled back loosely, humming softly under her breath. Daniel walked in to grab a glass of water, and when she turned to smile at him, something in his chest clenched painfully, guilt mixed with longing. As he brushed past her, her hand brushed his deliberately slow, leaving sparks in its wake. Neither spoke, but their silent gazes held words they dared not say aloud. Soon after, on a bitterly cold evening, Sarah stayed late again. Grace and Lily had been tucked into bed after Emily's therapist left, and Daniel sat slumped on the couch, head buried in his hands, his soul feeling heavier than his body. Sarah walked in quietly, her soft footsteps padding across the hardwood floor before she knelt beside him, gently placing a hand on his back. "Who takes care of you, Daniel?" she whispered, her voice thick with unspoken emotion. The dam broke. Tears he had fought back for months poured out of him in ragged sobs as he buried his face in his palms. Sarah moved closer, wrapping her arms around his shaking shoulders, and held him as the storm of guilt, grief, resentment, and exhaustion crashed through his entire being. From that night on, their conversations turned into secret exchanges of longing. Their fleeting touches became stolen kisses when no one was watching, and their friendship twisted into something dark and hidden. Daniel found himself slipping away from Emily, entirely coming home later, pretending to be busy with work and stepping out under the guise of errands just to spend stolen moments with Sarah. And while Emily never spoke a word of accusation, her eyes followed Daniel with a quiet, haunting sadness, as though she knew everything, but lacked the strength to fight for what was already slipping away. In those silent hours, as she sat in her wheelchair by the window, watching the skeletal trees sway in the winter wind, Emily felt more alone than she ever had in her life. Spring arrived, but the warmth of the season never touched Emily's world. She sat by the window in her wheelchair each morning watching dogwoods bloom, and the sun cast golden ribbons across her front yard, feeling nothing but cold inside. Daniel and Sarah no longer hid their closeness. Every Saturday, while Grace and Lily played quietly upstairs, Sarah would arrive with fresh pastries and coffee for Daniel, brushing her hand across his shoulder as she passed by her perfume, lingering long after she was gone. Emily noticed the way Daniel avoided her gaze now, how his kisses on her forehead were brief and mechanical, how his once strong arms no longer lingered around her fragile shoulders. Some nights when Sarah left and the girls were asleep, Emily would whisper into the darkness, "Do you still love me, Daniel?" He would force a tight smile, eyes darting away. "Of course I do." But even Emily could hear the lie echoing between them. One Saturday afternoon, the truth she feared was confirmed. Sarah arrived earlier than usual, humming as she walked through the kitchen carrying grocery bags. Emily sat silently at the dining table, her pale fingers folded tightly in her lap. After putting the groceries away, Sarah walked over, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "You're so strong, Emily," she whispered, brushing a stray hair from her friend's face. Emily forced a small smile, but her eyes remained lifeless. Later that evening, after dinner, Daniel sat slumped on the porch steps, his head buried in his hands, shoulders shaking. Sarah stepped outside her silhouette, framed by the soft porch light, and sat beside him. Without hesitation, she placed her hand on his back, rubbing slow circles until he lifted his tear-stained face. "You're doing so much, Daniel," she whispered, her voice gentle, yet dangerously tender. "But who takes care of you?" In that moment, Daniel collapsed against her, sobbing into her lap. As she stroked his hair with quiet reassurance, the last layer of restraint between them dissolved completely. Their kisses that night were no longer hidden whispers, but desperate declarations of betrayal. And upstairs, unseen, Emily sat alone in the silent dark, her tears falling onto trembling hands as she watched shadows move under the door, realizing that while her body was broken, her heart had been shattered beyond repair. The morning Daniel left was like any other spring day birds chirping softly outside the window while light filtered through the blinds in gentle gold stripes. Emily awoke to the muffled sounds of drawers opening and closing. She blinked disoriented, then turned her head toward the bedroom door just in time to see Daniel walking out, suitcase in hand. For a moment, she thought he was going on a business trip, as he often did before the accident. But there was something final in his posture, something cold and unrecognizable. When she wheeled herself into the kitchen an hour later, her trembling fingers found a folded note on the table. As she read the words, her vision blurred with tears. "I'm sorry, Emily. I can't do this anymore. I've sold the company. Sarah and I are leaving. I hope someday you understand." The note slipped from her hands and drifted onto the floor like a dying leaf. A strangled sob tore from her chest as she rocked back and forth in her wheelchair, her cries echoing through the silent house. Upstairs, Grace and Lily sat huddled together on the landing, tears streaming down their faces as they listened to their mother wail her grief too raw and deep for their young hearts to comprehend. I gave him everything Emily wept into her hands, her voice breaking with each word. My youth, my dreams, my body. I built his business with him. I gave him 2 beautiful daughters. And he left me like I was nothing. Later that night, as darkness wrapped around the house, Emily lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her body felt like stone, heavy and cold. The pain in her chest was so intense, it felt like she was drowning. She reached for her phone with shaking fingers and called her sister Melissa, who lived in Oregon. Between broken sobs, she told her everything: the accident, the loneliness, Daniel's betrayal. On the other end, Melissa cried too, her voice trembling with fierce love. Hold on, Emily. I'm coming for you. I promise you are not alone. Within days, Melissa mobilized everything she could from Oregon. She hired a local home nurse named Marcy, a kind-hearted woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that radiated patience. Marcy arrived each morning to help Emily with her daily needs, bathing her fragile body, changing bandages around surgical scars that never quite healed, and preparing soft meals she could stomach. Alongside Marcy, Melissa arranged for Mrs. Allen, a retired caterer from their church, to come by every afternoon. Mrs. Allen cooked warm dinners that filled the house with comforting scents of rosemary chicken and baked cornbread, humming old hymns as she worked. She even sat with Grace and Lily each evening, helping them braid their hair and finish school projects, filling a void Daniel's absence had left gaping and cold. Yet despite the support surrounding her, Emily continued to sink. Her once lively eyes remained dull and distant, her voice barely a whisper, even when answering her daughter's questions. Meals often went untouched, her frail frame shrinking further with each passing week. Late at night, after the girls fell asleep, curled against her in the living room, Emily would sit silently in her wheelchair, staring into the darkness, until tears rolled down her hollow cheeks. Maybe it would have been better if I hadn't survived, she whispered to Marcy one quiet afternoon, her voice shaking. Marcy froze mid-motion, her stethoscope resting against Emily's thin arm. Don't say that, she murmured softly, blinking back tears. But Emily only closed her eyes and sighed, her breath rattling with resignation. There's nothing left of me to live for. One afternoon, as a pale sun filtered through the blinds, Emily slumped forward in her wheelchair, unconscious. Marcy caught her before she fell, feeling the frightening limpness in her bones. Emily! Emily! She shouted, her heart thundering with panic. Her skin was cold and clammy, her pulse thready. Within minutes, paramedics wheeled her out on a gurney, oxygen tubes strapped beneath her nose, her daughters crying helplessly as they clutched each other by the doorway. In the ambulance, Emily drifted in and out of darkness, her mind filled with images of Daniel's departing figure, Sarah's hidden smiles, and the love she thought she would carry until her final breath, a love now buried under betrayal so deep she wasn't sure she ever wanted to wake up again. Emily awoke in a hospital room, the soft beep of monitors and the sterile scent of antiseptic surrounding her like a cold embrace. As her vision cleared, she saw a tall man sitting quietly by her bedside, dressed in a simple gray suit. His name was Gregory Foster, a 58-year-old philanthropist visiting another patient nearby, when he overheard Emily's heartbroken sobs days earlier. Moved by her pain, he offered help through his foundation. Within weeks, Gregory arranged for Emily and her daughters to travel to Oregon for advanced rehabilitation. Slowly, with months of therapy, she regained partial mobility with forearm crutches. Grace and Lily flourished in school, and Emily's eyes began to glow with life again. One crisp autumn afternoon, standing beneath golden maple trees with her daughters laughing beside her, Gregory knelt and whispered, "I don't want to be your savior, Emily. I want to walk this life with you." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, finally feeling hope after years of despair. Sometimes the people who betray us teach us what love isn't, so we can recognize what love truly is. Pain may break your body, but it can never break your soul if you choose to rise. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us, what does true love mean to you? And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell icon for more powerful stories that remind us that dignity and hope can grow even from the deepest wounds.